Hello, my name is David Anderson, and today on The David Anderson Show, we will be interviewing three of the most important people in history: Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and Dwight Eisenhower. Our first guest is Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Good to be here, David.
So, Mr. Roosevelt, tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was born on January 30th, 1882 into a wealthy family. I am an only child. I lived in the Hudson River Valley of New York. I had private tutors until I was 14, and in 1896 I attended Groton School for Boys in Massachusetts. I lost the use of my legs, which is why when I was in public I was holding on to someone's arm, sitting down, or grasping a podium.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about your career as the president?
First of all, I was elected president 4 times. That's the most any president has been elected. I was first elected in 1932 during the Great Depression. I got elected on my promise of getting the economy back on track. In my first speech as president, I said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. After a few weeks in office, I made a bank holiday, which is where banks were closed for 4 days to stop people from taking out all their money and the banks going bankrupt. I also promised a plan called the New Deal. This included a number of programs designed to help the nation get through its economic crisis and put people back to work. I also began a series of radio talks called Fireside Chats. I spoke about things in the nation and what the government was doing about them. This made people feel more confident and hopeful.
Okay, what are some of these New Deal acts?
There was the Social Security Act, which gave benefits to the elderly and orphan and to workers who were injured in industrial accidents. There was the Agricultural Adjustment Act that gave farmers money to make up for the government's request that they bring fewer crops to a market. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration that provided funds for local and state relief organizations. There were also the Civilian Conservation Corps that gave 25 million young men work in environmental improvement.
By the year 1939, our economy had slightly improved, but still 9 million people were out of work.
Our economy
What
was...
say about that?
I'm sorry. Our economy was in terrible shape. I tried as best I could. I set up organizations to get people back on track, but I believe the start of World War II was what got our economy fully back on track.
Glad to hear that. Our second guest on the show today is Teddy Roosevelt, if we may call you that. Ha ha ha. Tell me a little bit about your personal background.
Well, I was born October 27th, 1858 in New York City, New York. As a boy, I was mostly homeschooled by private tutors and by my parents. I eventually went to Harvard and in 1880 went to Columbia Law School.
Okay, tell me about your early political career.
I joined the New York State Assembly as a representative. However, my mother and wife died on the exact same day, which was February 14th, 1844. After that, I left New York for the Dakota Territory. 2 years later, I returned to New York City and tried to run for mayor, but lost.
So as I understand, you've taken a strong interest in the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, I had organized a volunteer cavalry unit known as the Rough Riders. I was a war hero because I led my unit on a charge up San Juan Hill. Because of this, I was elected governor of New York in 1898.
Tell me a little bit about your presidency.
Well, I took over as president after McKinley was assassinated in 1901. I became the youngest man to assume the U.S. presidency. As many people know, I did not like monopolies. I prosecuted them using the Sherman Antitrust Act. This was done out of my commitment that all Americans deserve a square deal.
Yeah.
A square deal was a domestic program that created reform in the workplace of industry and consumer protection, and overall aimed at helping the middle class. I also helped with the Panama Canal. At the time, Panama was being controlled by Colombia and turned down over $10 million offer, plus an annual $250,000 to buy them out. I had Marines sent to Panama to prevent Colombia soldiers from reaching Panama's harbors. Because of this, Panama was freed from Colombia, and the Panama Canal was created. After this, the Roosevelt Corollary was created, which stated that the United States had the right to act as an international police power in Latin America.
You're an environmentalist as well?
Of course. In 1906, I signed the National Monuments Act, which protected sites like the Grand Canyon and preserving a number of wildlife sanctuaries, national forests, and federal game reserves. I also helped create 21 irrigation projects.
What happened when you left office in 1909?
Well, Taft took over and I went on a safari. But after a few years, I got bored and decided to run again in 1912. Though I lost to Woodrow Wilson in 1912, and sadly, I died in my sleep on January 6, 1919.
Hello, the other interviewer had to step out. Dwight Eisenhower, tell me about your early years.
I was born on October 14th, 1890 in Denison, Texas. I was the third of my parents' 7 sons, and my dad cleaned train engines for a living. And my younger brother, who was 3, died when I was 6.
Did you play sports?
I was a star athlete in high school, and I played football at Michigan for 2 years before transferring to West Point, where I continued to play football, but knee injuries sidelined me, and I quit playing.
What about your military background?
After graduating, I was promoted to second lieutenant. When I was at a military base in Texas, I met my soon-to-be wife, Mamie Dodd. I was promoted to first lieutenant on my wedding day, and although I wanted to be in the European I was sent to a tank training base in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I was appointed to Chief Military Aide under General MacArthur in 1929. My big break came in 1942 when I was promoted to Major General and led the Operation Torch, and on D-Day I was promoted to 5-star rank.